Global warming being the biggest problem facing this country is ridiculous. We have bigger problems right now.
There's no greater threat to our planet than
climate change, one of the major issues of our time.
I actually have spoken to Donald Trump and told him that the UK believes in the Paris Agreement.
I went to Antarctica to film a documentary about climate change.
Back for the ship!
Except I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to try and match the BBC or the National Geographic and create something beautiful. We all know Antarctica is beautiful.
I think he's really cute. Oh, he just fell over.
And I'm by no means an expert. My only claim is that I kind of like our planet, and I don't really want people screwing it over. 97% of scientists agree that climate change over the last century has been caused by humans. So why is the voice of the 3% so loud?
It seems we live in an era in which science and scientists are in danger of being held in low and decreasing esteem, and this could have serious consequences.
human activity is changing the climate. That is beyond dispute. Everything else is politics.
It's supposed to be 70 degrees today. It's freezing here. We need some global warming.
We trust politicians to make the right decisions.
Make our planet great again.
But what happens if they don't?
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
In this HuffPost film, we'll see how climate change will force people to flee their homes as islands and cities drown under rising seas. How an increase in tourism in Antarctica could speed up its decline. And we ask, whose responsibility is it to save us? This is Antarctica, the end of the Earth, the only land not owned by humans. Nearly twice the size of Australia, it's got 90% of the world's ice, 70% of the world's fresh water, about 40 million penguins, but no people. We're travelling with a boatload of scientists to discover what the ice melting here means for us back home.
It just seems like such a huge topic that is, you can't sum it up in one sentence. And I guess that's kind of why we came out here, to try and understand it and try and break it down a bit more for people who haven't done a PhD in marine biology, or, you know, haven't spent years and years, studying glaciers.
But let's start with the dictionary's definition of climate change. A change in global or regional climate patterns. In particular, a change apparent from the mid to late 20th century onwards, and attributed largely to the increased levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide produced by the use of fossil fuels. Climate change is overwhelming, and the science can be more than complicated.
Scientists use a lot of words that often are perceived wrongly.
Tomo is on this trip to learn more about environmental action for business. He also studied glaciers at Cambridge University.
When scientists say, there is uncertainty, they're often not pointing towards the fact that climate change itself is uncertain, but the degree to which a factor can influence climate change is uncertain.
And why is our focus on Antarctica?
Because it has 90% of the world's ice. Melt it, rest of the world swims.
I'd like to understand more about why some people don't believe the science.
The issue is not whether the climate is changing, as it always is changing. The issue is whether there is legislative proposals before us that could do anything about it.
I think it's a big scam for a lot of people to make a lot of money.
Do you think we are addressing climate change with enough urgency as it deserves?
I think we're over-addressing it.
Harrison Schmitt is a former US Senator and the only professional geologist to walk on the surface of the moon.
If we continue along this path, it's going to cause a significant economic disruption.
Even when people do believe the climate is changing, there's a whole new argument over whether humans are to blame.
Nature is driving the climate, and we are very presumptuous to think that we're going to have a significant effect. In fact, there's some indication that the sun is starting to become less active, over the last several cycles, and that we may actually start to see some cooling. And more recently, it has not been warming nearly as much as the so-called climate models have predicted.
Hang on a minute, what did he say?
It has not been warming nearly as much as the so-called climate models have predicted.
While scientists say the sun could be entering a cooler period, there is no evidence that this will counteract the effects of greenhouse gases. So it's our first time on Antarctica. It's really not that cold, nowhere near as cold as I thought it would be. But I know that it was the warmest day ever recorded in Antarctica just before we left London.
This is a beautiful day. I mean, of course we enjoy it, it's pleasant, but in fact it's a bad sign. It shouldn't be so nice at this time of the year. It should be snowing heavily and the winter should be coming.
Okay, there is evidence on the ground that Antarctica's getting warmer. So does this mean we should all be panicking?
If tomorrow NASA told us all that there was a meteor coming from outer space that was going to hit this planet in 20 years and wipe it out, we would get together fast and we would accelerate technology, we'd get our act together and we'd do something about that threat. What people can't see quite, and what I find exhausting, is that that's actually happening and that we are going to destroy ourselves.
The sea ice reflects the sun back out of the earth, and then... Why are you laughing? I want to learn more about the science behind climate change. I'm sailing from the port of Ushuaia in Argentina, travelling more than 600 miles south into the Antarctic Circle. So this will be my home for the next 10 days. I don't have the luxury of a big crew. It's just me, my colleague Dawn, and our cameras. There's a mix of people on the ship because anybody can come, as long as you can afford it. On board with us is a load of activists, scientists, tourists, explorers, a world-famous adventurer and his son, marine biologists, ornithologists, glaciologists, and people from all over the world. So, what am I talking about? So something that's been mentioned to me a few times is that sea ice in Antarctica is the air conditioning of the world. When someone said that to me, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes a bit more sense. So does sea ice almost act like an air conditioner?
Not so much an air conditioner, but a reflector.
Okay.
It avoids the tundra, the earth, the rocks, the ocean will all absorb heat. Mm-hmm. The ice reflects it back.
So it helps keep it cool?
It helps to keep it cool, helps to reduce the degree of warming.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, when it melts, it's not the actual melting of it that causes the sea level to rise. It's more the melting of it causes the earth to warm up, and then... Why are you laughing? See, this is a problem. You can't... Try again. So can you just explain, if that melts there, that is land ice, yeah, what happens?
As ice melts, then so it's adding water. But if it's sea ice that's melting, it was already part of the water before it froze. But in the case of ice that's come off the glacier, then there's the potential there for a rise in sea level.
And then if the land ice melts, which it is melting, then we're basically all screwed. Really privileged to be here, but I did manage to forget a hat, and so I've been given
which I'm going to put on when I get really cold. Not right now.
You ever seen it with a National Geographic?
This is Peterman Island. These are Gentoo penguins. And here is the scientist.
Penguins have that star appeal. Everybody loves penguins.
Noah Stryker is an ornithologist. He holds the record for the most birds spotted in a year. Here he is, bird watching from his hot tub.
There's a golden oriole over there.
I've heard penguins being described as the canaries of climate change.
Well, penguins do react to the environment around them. And so you can tell what's going on with, say, the krill fishery and populations by studying the things that eat them. It may be easier to see and study things like penguins, which are very charismatic and popular and relatively easy to see.
My favourite thing so far is definitely penguins.
They feed on krill. Krill feed on phytoplankton, which is the basis of the food chain down here, and they grow on sea ice. As the sea ice is melting, there's less place for this phytoplankton to grow, less food for the krill, less food for the penguins.
I've just seen Mika, so I'm going to go grab him and grill him about krill.
Individual krill is quite a small creature. It's similar to a shrimp. Down here, pretty much everybody eats krill. And if you don't eat krill, then you eat somebody who eats krill. In 10 years' time, or maybe 20 years, there will be no krill, which will be a disaster. That would just destroy the whole ecosystem because so many creatures depend on it.
West Antarctica is one of the fastest warming regions in the world, which is why we chose to film here. Since filming, one of the largest icebergs ever recorded has broken off from the Larsen Sea ice shelf. 4 times the size of London, it weighs around 1 trillion tons. If the ice disappears, the krill disappear, and the penguins go hungry. And if the ice disappears, it could cause chaos for humans thousands of miles away.
We've seen such an uptick in hurricane strength.
If the sea level rises, then yes, I'm 100% sure that my country is going to be gone.
We do not want to be climate refugees one day.
Antarctica is dangerous enough because it has 90% of the world's ice and 70% of the world's fresh water. Melt it, the rest of the world swims. Go and ask somebody that lives on the Marshall Islands.
I've seen it when dozens of women in my village came together and planted pandanus trees all along the coast to protect our shoreline.
Go and ask somebody who can't eat because the crops have failed 10 years in a row because it hasn't rained. Not us wealthy people in the West that can deal with it. Go and ask them.
For us, this is a matter of our national security. This is no longer some intangible theory or distant threat. It is knocking at my front door.
We have created a new humanitarian crisis. We have created climate refugees.
Climate change is not just our problem, no. We are co-owners, co-creators, and co-authors in this story, and it can have a very different ending from what I fear. But this isn't about numbers. It's about people.
50 million. That's how many climate refugees there could be by 2050. 50 million. To put that into perspective, there are 4.8 million refugees who fled Syria. Times that by 10. Where are they going to go?
We do not want to be climate refugees one day.
Bryant Zebedee is from the Marshall Islands, a chain of islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Atoll nations like mine are on the forefront of extinction due to sea level rising. With 2 degrees of greenhouse gases, it'll drown my people.
Antarctica's dangerous enough. Melt it, rest of the world swims.
And it means low-lying countries are just going to drown. They're going to disappear.
I come into contact with people all over the world that are battling the difficulties of climate change.
Jeffrey Sachs is one of the world's leading economists and a senior UN advisor on sustainability.
One doesn't have to be a climatologist to know that we're already in the middle of this, but I go all over the world and I see sandstorms and I see dust storms and I see peat burning and I see droughts and floods and low-lying areas hit by cyclones. This is not a rare phenomenon.
The climate change, the rising sea levels will directly affect my city. It's already been doing that. So we can see erratic weather changes, weather patterns, rainfall, extreme heat, extreme cold.
My country is a peninsula and we're at sea level. We don't have mountains, so if the sea level rises, then yes, I'm 100% sure that my country is going to be gone.
The rising sea won't discriminate. No matter what action the world takes to fight climate change, more than 400 towns and cities across the USA have passed the point of no return, and they will at some point be submerged by the ocean.
The past 5-10 years alone, we've seen such an uptick in hurricane strength.
Maggie Duane lives in Florida, where her childhood home of Pine Island is at risk of rising sea levels.
Just the severity and the frequency of hurricanes and storms, it's noticeably different from when I was a kid. 10, 20 years from now, the sea level could rise probably up to Main Street, what we call Main Street. I don't think a lot of people are going to want to move, but it's a reality that people will probably have to face.
All over the world, people are hurting. It's true in New York City with Superstorm Sandy, the massive hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico, low-lying areas that are now increasingly flooded.
Climate change is important to me because I've been a teacher and I have experienced my children that hail from the lowest strata of the society in India suffer as a direct consequence of climate change.
Chennai saw the heaviest of rainfalls in 2015. We had a flood, and in 2016 we got no rain.
We are all global warming victims. If we islanders survive, I promise you, the whole world will survive.
It just feels like such a huge, mammoth issue, and I'm not really sure what the everyday person is supposed to do about it. I mean, you can not eat as much meat, or you can turn your light bulb off, or you can, maybe walk instead of driving, but how much of a difference does that really make?
One of the first questions they ask you on your application is, do you have your wisdom teeth and do you have your appendix? I would love to work on the continent at one of the science bases. However, it's very competitive. The application process is not so much rigorous, but it's very unusual.
Christopher James has lived in remote places and has his sights set on working in Antarctica.
One of the first questions they ask you on your application is, do you have your wisdom teeth and do you have your appendix? So this year I will be finding a little drive-through surgery and getting my appendix removed.
Just in case you didn't catch that, this guy is going to have actual body parts removed so he can improve his chances of getting a job in Antarctica. Why? Because there are no hospitals and you can be stuck there for up to 6 months.
And then that gives you a great upper hand in the application. I shouldn't be sharing this. This is top secret information.
When we're down on the Antarctic Peninsula, it's going to be about zero.
Jumper's job on the ship is basically to keep us alive.
How long would this keep me alive for if I got it on successfully?
It depends on the temperature.
Okay.
If we're in the sea, there is a limit.
Okay.
I think it takes quite a special person to work in the bases around the Antarctic continent. You've got to kind of be quite strong. You can't get out. Stop. A gallant effort.
It's really heavy.
It is heavy. It's designed to save your life, that's why. You've got to be able to entertain yourself. You've got to entertain others.
I'm about to jump into the sea in Antarctica.
Shake like a dog.
Head or feet first? What did you do? I feel like I've been led to my death.
No, you're not.
When do I go?
Whenever you're ready. You're only pushing.
how people have fun in Antarctica.
This is how people have fun in Antarctica.
Okay, so I'm currently at Palmer Station, Antarctica.
This is Naomi Shelton, an American research scientist who vlogs about her life in Antarctica.
And here's the British base with their lovely scenery. There's the radioactive lab. Like the view. Look at that. Sure doesn't disappoint Antarctica.
Life in Antarctica is really simple because your main problem is don't die. When I fell down the crevasse, I landed on a snow bridge that somehow managed to support the impact of 5 meters down the crevasse, I guess. So I could touch the walls on both sides with my hands and with my legs. So I would stab my crampons into the walls and just gradually make my way up.
It felt really good that there was just this place, a powerful place, a dangerous place, that we all had a responsibility to.
Rob Swan was the first man to ever walk to both the North and South Poles. He and his son Barney are now planning an expedition to the South Pole using exclusively renewable energy. Another world first.
We're at the same level as everything. You know, out here, if the generator on the ship breaks down, if the ship sinks, you know, we're out of the game. And you can't ring up mummy for help or dial 999 for the ambulance. We're on the edge of the planet.
Antarctica. It's humbling. Words and pictures just can't do it justice. But it's changing.
We're just walking past some travel agent windows and they're advertising last minute trips to Antarctica. Like you're kind of jetting off to Spain or something. I didn't really realise that you could book a last minute trip to Antarctica.
It's not very environmentally friendly to bring people to Antarctica on a ship. So each person who's here on our expedition has used 12 tons of CO2 to be here. That's an average UK family for a year.
I feel guilty, you know, when I'm on a plane going to somewhere to talk about these things and the plane's running off fuel, but it is definitely a hard line to walk, and I feel that every time that we're on a boat. You know, documentaries are great, but until you can feel and you can touch and you can engage with your environment, I think creating that connection is really hard.
It's something we definitely felt conscious of. Coming all this way, flying so many miles, and then talking about carbon footprints, all without being hypocrites.
From the first expedition ship or bringing tourists down in the Antarctic was back in 1969. So then you were talking like a few hundred people. Last season there was around 34,000 people coming to visit.
Shelley runs the trips aboard the Ocean Endeavour.
And the expected growth over the next 2 to 3 years is going to be around 45%. You know, we do have an increase of temperature, and now we're really dealing with a lot more crevasses that are appearing at some of the sites we go, which are really apparent at the end of the season. So there we have to modify for that. Yes, it is my last voyage as expedition leader with Quark. Now we're going into bigger vessels. For me, I actually want to go back to New Zealand. I want to live in New Zealand. I have so many phenomenal memories, but the one that will always stick with me is my first ever landing.
And does it ever stop feeling special?
No. Every day is different, every day is exciting, every day is like a new day.
Got a pretty awesome job.
It's a fantastic job.
You wear enough clothes and you're never cold. The downside was at one point I realized I hadn't actually taken off my underwear for 5.5 weeks straight. But studying the penguins was incredible.
Here's our lab. Tiny, again, but does the trick.
When you are a patient person and you can cope with the fact that you are stuck with a small number of people in a small confined space, it's wonderful. It's absolutely one of the best things that ever happened to me.
I'm really out of breath because I've been on a ship for 3 weeks. They have this giant field to run around on all the time.
And it heightens everything while you're here. It's a life-changing place.
It's so beautiful. It really makes me feel like really motivated to keep pushing and keep reporting on climate change and making people pay attention and finding ways to make people pay attention is really quite overwhelming, especially when you know that it is happening, climate change is happening. It's not something we can avoid, it's something we have to do something about. It's just, what the hell do we do?
Our biggest threat to the environment is that we believe that somebody else is going to do something about it.
So we know there's a problem. It's just, who's going to solve it? Or should I say, who can solve it? Should governments be taking more action? Should businesses become more responsible? Or is it all just down to us?
I've been sleeping without air conditioners on.
Not wasting water. I take really quick showers.
I'm a vegetarian.
I've tried to eat a lot less meat.
I start separating my food and composting them.
To produce very less plastic and other waste.
Wherever possible, I use public transport.
Try to turn out the lights, use less water, that kind of stuff.
But not everyone's convinced we can make a difference.
Well, these are a lot of very small cumulative changes. I don't think that they make significant changes to the overall energy system.
This is David Hone, Chief Climate Change Advisor at Shell.
Lots of small changes are good. It may not affect the total to as much as that person expects. So the change really has to happen at a systemic level.
That changes either need to be made by making it incredibly tangible and easy, or the oil companies are going to have to be the ones to pave the way forward.
Businesses have a unique role in society, which is a commercial role, and their focus is primarily commercial. Moralising in society belongs to other people. It belongs to the government. It belongs to institutions like, like the church.
If you don't see it, it's probably because you're a CEO of an oil and gas company and you just don't want to see it.
I think business is taking a role in the formulation of these sort of laws and this framework within which it operates. But it's, I think it's really the role of government to set that framework.
Okay, so if it's not the responsibility of businesses, then are we back to politics?
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
The Paris Agreement is the world's attempt to fight global warming. It's a pledge to keep global temperature from rising by any more than 2 degrees from what it was before the start of the Industrial Revolution. 195 parties signed the agreement in 2016, even North Korea, but 3 countries aren't in it. Nicaragua, because the agreement doesn't go far enough, Syria, because it's in the midst of civil war, and now the United States of America.
I think the Paris Agreement will have no impact one way or the other.
This is Harrison Schmidt from earlier, who is convinced nature is the primary cause of climate change.
If we'd stayed in, it'd have a major impact on the economy of the United States and the well-being of U.S. citizens.
Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement is disgraceful. It will not stand. There's absolutely no basis for it, and it's a danger for the United States and a danger for the world.
So if it's not the responsibility of business, governments can't be trusted, and if we can't make a difference, then what's the answer? I travelled to the Starmus Festival in Norway. Some of the world's brightest minds are here, including Stephen Hawking.
We have given our planet a disastrous gift of climate change. We are running out of space, and the only places to go to are underworlds. It is time to explore other solar systems. Spreading out may be the only thing that saves us from ourselves.
Pretty overwhelming experience. I'm a bit worried about kind of going back into a world where there's a lot of climate change cynics. It's been so great to be somewhere where everyone is so passionate about getting things done. And there's been a couple of solutions teams put together to come up with tangible solutions and things that everyone can do, whether it's from putting out your recycling, making your own washing powder, to something much bigger. One of the kind of main points to come out of this for me is that no one on this ship wants to alienate climate change deniers. You know, no one wants to kind of have a go at them. They don't really want to quibble over how it's caused. They just want to focus on how we can fix it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone's going to come up with.
So why did we go to the end of the Earth? Well, we wanted to open up the dialogue of climate change to everyone because it affects all of us. I guess we thought there might be a solution to global warming, but we grew to realise that there's no easy answer. The climate is changing, regardless of whose fault it is. We just need to stop playing the blame game. So there's a responsibility that's required of all of us, from the very top world leaders to businesses to the person at the bottom who's got a vote. If these big corporations won't accept moral responsibility, then I guess it's down to us to make sure that we're voting in world leaders who act in our planet's best interest. Because as simple as it might sound, we can't just up and move to another planet. This one is ours, and it's our responsibility to make sure we fix it for future generations.
When I have kids one day, I want to be able to tell them that I did what I could and I tried to protect the world that they hopefully will enjoy.
Tell us what motivates you to tackle climate change.
That right.
Okay, we've just watched the Huffington Post documentary on climate change awareness. Did you see any of this being explained? What the purposes of it is for? And any of that? Go, no, that's not part of climate change, global warming, is it? It's not blocking the sun at all, it's not.
Don't worry if you can't hear what I'm saying. I couldn't even hear myself. This is the loudest sound you could possibly conceive. And, as it turns out, the cleanest. Now, the most amazing thing is that cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapour. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet washing. It will actually rain. I told you! It's raining! That's unbelievable! Oh, let's just praise God! It's making its own weather!
This is my back garden, and a view I see pretty much every day of the week. A cloudy sky with streaks of chemtrails passing through them. And they've got these chemtrails going for miles, and they linger in the air for hours. They expand like that. But you didn't hear any of that being mentioned on the Huffington Post documentary. And these airplanes, when they're chemtrailing like that, I have a trouble zooming in and keeping up with them because they're going that fast. But when it's a commercial jet, I can just tail them, no problem. But these are going a lot quicker. Never any markings on the planes, look. All you can see is that there's at the top there's a blue and a red stripe. Everything else you can't see. Oh yeah, there it is. One blue and a red. with 4 jets.
Thank you. A space experiment that should be visible here in Maryland is set to happen early Thursday morning, depending on the weather. Alex Dimitrick explains what we could see.
Space weather is most visible when it fires up auroras, the northern and southern lights. It's caused by the bombardment of highly energized particles from the sun striking Earth's protective magnetic field. This week, NASA hopes to study those particles over the mid-Atlantic by creating a kind of artificial aurora. Launching a small rocket from NASA's Wallops Spaceport in Virginia, which will dispense soft drink-sized canisters of colored vapor to create clouds of green and red visible to people on the ground.
We expect them to be able to see it, especially in the D.C., Baltimore area, really from anywhere from New York down to North Carolina.
The artificial cloud will be created 96 to 124 miles up in the ionosphere, giving scientists a glimpse into how highly energized particles interact with air molecules. But the clouds won't last long.
About 5 to 10 minutes after their deployment.
While it takes rockets to study those energized particles, they do have down-to-earth effects on technologies we all depend upon every day.
Looking at our power systems, our telecommunication systems, all that type of thing.
Threatened by space weather to be studied with Thursday's launch provided regular weather clears. Alex Dimitrick, WJZ Eyewitness News.
Back in your garden again. I mean, look at the length of that one already. And he's still pumping it out. How long it is, and it's still going. Look at the state of that sky, and he's streaming across there, look, right the way from there, all the way up, look. And he's only spitting 2 out. But still, look at it, expanding. Can't really see any markings. And it's as if it's turning as opposed to being flying straight. difficult to keep hold of focus when it's travelling that quick. I mean, look at that. See the plane coming across the middle of the screen there. A little dot. He's not dropping anything off.
Okay, this is my dictionary. That's the nearest I've got to climate change. Climate. And that's it, just describing the weather. No climate change. Move that. You're on the other side of the page. So it's not in my dictionary, but I'll tell you what is ground zero. There we go, look. A point on the ground directly below the centre of a nuclear explosion. And that is what we had on 9/11, without a doubt. And then we've got other made up words, like transgender, that's not in my dictionary. Sustainability, that's not in my dictionary either. Sustain, that's about all we've got there. Sustain and sustain up, and that's it, no sustainability. So all these words are constantly being added to the dictionary to suit their narratives.
If everybody has got a dictionary or an old dictionary, look up these words: anti-Semitic, climate change, global warming. In my dictionary I can't find any of these words. I've got about 7 words here I've just thought of within a few minutes. Next we've got ground zero, homophobia, sustainability. That's the only one I can find in my dictionary, ground zero, and it doesn't mean this. All these definitions are from Wikipedia. So I've got sustainability and then transgender, and the only one I can find in my dictionary is ground zero. It doesn't mean that. Now if we go to the UN Agenda 21 site, this is what you need to be looking at, what they're doing. I mean, it all looks nice, neat, and like they're doing a good job and this and that, but the truth is they're not. It's pretty much exactly the opposite what's going on to what they're saying they're trying to achieve. that's the UN, sorry, the Agenda 21, and the Agenda 2030 is all this sustainability, and they've got 17 goals, and this is another video because it's quite large. This is, they've got 17 goals, and I think there's 169 topics or goals within goals, but it's the same thing: end poverty, end pollution, end climate change, sustainability, and again, it's just the exact opposite that's happening. You don't keep chemtrail in the sky if you're going to take this. Where's all the poison go? It's going to go into the sea. It's going to kill wildlife. It poisons the air, the trees, the birds, the bees, the grass, the plants, ruins crops, it puts up food prices. So how can they be ending poverty when they're putting food prices up? Anyway, this is I'm going to do a video on this when I've looked into it properly. The links, I'll put the links to these in the description. But as you can see from the climate change documentary, they're not even looking at chemtrails. They're not even looking at HAARP. Why? Because they don't want anybody knowing about them. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope it's opened people's eyes up to exactly what all these industrialists are doing.